In derivatives markets, a lot of times end up being kind of that shock absorber. So when you see major disruptions to supply and demand in energy markets, the reason that the futures and derivatives in these spaces are there to help you hedge that risk, especially if you're an end user. It really is just making sure that our markets are functioning, the way they should, that they're being properly surveilled, that we don't see any evidence of manipulation or anything to be concerning. During these times, we need these liquid, we need these vibrant, we need the access.
What impact will there be losing some of the CFTC commissioners?
A lot of this really depends on how quickly the United States Senate moves in the confirmation process, but let's say that everything goes smoothly and they are confirmed. That does leave the chairman with majority Republican commissioners. But I think for the CFTC, because we worked in a bipartisan manner historically, it won't be that big of a change of the agenda. Certainly, we will probably have a little more influence when there are issues that really are concerning, and there are, a number of times where Bishop Pham and I do disagree with what the chairman's put forward. But that's all part of the process of coming together and working out, the best deal on whatever rulemaking or whatever items on the agenda. So I think we'll still be able to get things done. It just will have, a little more back and forth in a bipartisan manner.
What did you learn working under another CFTC commissioner?
For a while there, it was just Commissioner Stump and Chairman Benham. And that gets really complicated when there's only two people. They can't talk together because that would violate the Sunshine Act. That then becomes a meeting that has to be open. And so it's a lot of staff work. The staff will really become your communicators. And that is tricky because you sometimes want to have that candid conversation with the other commissioners. I'm thankful that there will be three of us, and that won't change things, but it doesn't, you still have to really rely on staff in these situations where there's fewer members to talk to, fewer members to make deals with, because sometimes I find myself cutting deals with maybe Commissioner Goldsmith or Commissioner Johnson. When you only have two other people to cut deals with, that's a lot of work, a lot of staff back and forth, and certainly, it's important to have those relationships. And I would say that's another thing that I really learned working for Commissioner Stump was the importance of those staff relationships. I'm going to rely on my staff a lot. Should we have a smaller commission going forward.
Why do you worry about the regulatory devolvement in the U.S. undermining the industry?
We have to be careful that we are not somehow disadvantaged the clearing of derivatives. This was the purpose of, when the G20 met in Philadelphia, the whole point was central clearing is a way of taking risk out of the system. That was an area of the economy that did really well during the financial crisis. It was a strength that people recognized that maybe that was the best outcome going forward, is to make sure more and more of these transactions are centrally cleared. So if we're going to be promoting central clearing, we need to make sure we're not doing things that disadvantage us, especially globally. So one of the things I've talked about, it has to do with the the Basel III capital rules that they put up in the U.S. It's a little bit different than what Europe has put up for their rules. And so we've gone a lot further, and some of it is very detrimental to the cleared derivative space, requiring banks, which a lot of them are future commission merchants, to hold a lot more capital for cleared position, not recognizing that by using central clearing, you have now taken that risk away from the bank. Yeah. So we've worked carefully with the prudential regulators. I think the prudential regulators have seen the comments coming in and realize that this is part of the rules that just won't work and we have to fix it. Mm-hmm. And that's not where we stop either. We have to keep working globally to make sure that our rules are, we're able to continue to have global markets, and that all of our rules are complementary, not conflicting, and avoid any kind of policy that becomes very nationalistic and somehow then starts to fragment these markets.
How do you balance harmonizing regulations between jurisdictions and respecting national sovereignty?
One of the areas that we need to think about is data reporting. I think everybody recognizes that globally we need these swaps and transactions to be reported. We need to be collecting that information, but if we're all collecting it in different formats, different fields, we'll never get a clear picture of what the global swaps markets look like. And so trying to bring some harmony to our data, how we're going to collect that, how it's going to be aggregated, and making it easier for those in the market to report that data to the various jurisdictions so that you're not somehow making it easier just to work and operate in one jurisdiction and only report there. That kind of defeats the purpose of trying to get all this data into regulators, which was really missing during the financial crisis. We just didn't have the size of these markets then. The other piece of this is recognizing that other countries do a pretty good job of regulating and that we should recognize their regulations at home. So we do a lot of what we call comparability determinations, where we say the regulations in this country match up really well with the regulations in our country, and so we're going to say if you are meet the regulations in your country, you're able to operate in our country as long as you have let us applied and are reporting what you have reported to that country.
What are your worries about changing the collection of data and information?
Anytime we are collecting data and information on our registered entities, we have a special requirement to really ensure that we are doing everything we can to protect the data, to encrypt it, whatever we need to do as far as providing the security with the information that's been entrusted to us. And I get very concerned when we are starting to say, well, we'll just offer this data to maybe another agency. Because while I would hope they have similar standards, but it's hard to know. How who's using that data and what are they using that data for? And so I'm always a little bit concerned when we start collecting information and then willingly say we're going to turn it over, whether it's the FDIC or even the SEC. I mean, without a foundation of why we're doing this, what protections are in place. So I'm always very careful about any rule that says we're going to give somebody access to this information without all of those safeguards already in place and limiting exactly what information we're going to get on.
Why do you want to update the CFTC's large trader reporting requirements?
One of the ways that the data was supposed to be transmitted isn't even in use anymore. You know how quickly technology changes. So we were asking for code that doesn't even exist anymore. So that was part of it, just modernizing how we request this data, how we need, the format we're getting this data, just bringing our regulations kind of up to speed with where everybody else is. And that's kind of the biggest thing. The other piece to this is a lot of that information goes into our daily weekly commitment of traders reporting, which is a really highly used report. You see it quoted daily in the news. People really rely on that, and we need to get better at and more efficient in how we put that out. It's been a very labor-intensive job. We want to streamline that, make it easier, get that report to people in a more timely manner. And that, to me, that's the transparency piece. That is an important report. A lot of people use it, and we need to get it right. And part of getting it right is to make sure we have the right data coming in the right format so we can efficiently build that report and get it out there for the public to see.
How can the CFTC and SEC work better together in the crypto space?
It is tough because I think the tension makes for a better story sometimes. And so a lot of times what might be a small disagreement becomes a much bigger news story. Washington, generally, this job, it's about relationships. And so we have to be able to build relationships with our counterparts. I do what I can to work with my fellow Republican commissioners over the SEC. I was recently just on a panel with Commissioner Summer talking about crypto and talking about how the two agencies can work together. We actually had at one time a CFTC, SEC kind of working group. It's still on our website, but it's been defunct. And I think, let's re-engage. Let's start having those conversations together. There's nothing that's keeping us from having joint discussions and roundtables and trying to help bring some clarity. I do think we need legislation in this space, but that doesn't mean we can't do anything until that legislation is in place.
What are your thoughts on new crypto regulation?
A lot of big steps have occurred in the last year, for sure. The House passed a bill on a bipartisan vote, probably a larger bipartisan vote than anyone expected. House Agriculture and House Financial Services Committees working together to write a bill. Sometimes that's harder than getting Democrats and Republicans to work on a bill. They are very careful about their jurisdiction. So the fact that they were able to sit down and say, we recognize that this falls in both of our jurisdictions and we have to work together, that was notable. And I think that was an important step in moving this forward. It is an election year, very hard to get legislation, especially major legislation done in an election year. But I think this sets it up for the next Congress to really pick it up and move forward. I don't think at the end of the day, the bill will be exactly as what they passed in the House. I don't think it'll be exactly as whatever ends up being introduced in the Senate. It'll be some sort of hybrid, but clear recognition on the Hill that this legislation needs to happen. And I think that you'll also see the majority leaders in both parties, the Speaker and the majority leader in the Senate, recognizing that it's worth giving floor time to this issue as well. So I think we are probably next Congress. I do think we'll get some legislation.
Is Ethereum a commodity or security?
Ethereum is a commodity that is well established. There are court precedents. We have futures products that are trading on the price of Ethereum. The recent ETF that was approved with the SEC recognizes that this is, we have futures products on Ethereum. So that's settled law. But I always caveat it with the kind of level studying a little bit on the security versus commodity question, because it's never that simple. Everything's a commodity. If it's bought and sold in interstate transaction, it's a commodity, except for onions and movie theater tickets, which is a whole other story. We don't want to get into here, but everything else is a commodity. Securities are commodities, right? So the way it works is with that underlying understanding that everything is a commodity, once it's deemed a security by the SEC, under a Howey test, then it's in their jurisdiction. So to call something a commodity or a security leaves out part of the story. That if this SEC comes up with the legal reasons why it's a security, that's going to go in your jurisdiction, and then it's out of ours. So I think that's why this has been an ongoing conversation. People will say, we've already settled ETH. Why are we still talking about it? You're still talking about it because as you change the way that these cryptocurrencies are, whether it's issued or traded, sometimes it can change the features such that it could become a security. Now, I'm not saying that's where Ether is today, but people could look at it differently as it changes over time. So it's kind of a tough question to answer. The futures on Ether are under our jurisdiction, and we have enforcement authority to bring fraud and manipulation cases against the buying and selling